The day my son brought me to that title company, he held the door open for me the way he used to when he was 10 years old and still trying to impress me. I remember thinking, at least, he still has some manners. I had no idea he had already calculated what my house was worth and decided exactly how to take it from me. The folder sitting on the conference table was thick. Official-looking seals on every page. Kenneth explained everything in a voice so calm and reasonable I almost believed him. "It's just a precaution, Mom. In case something happens to you, it protects everyone." The notary looked up from the documents. She was maybe 55, silver clip earrings, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She reached across the table, picked up the top form, and studied the signature block for a long moment. Then she looked at me. Then she set her pen down. "Mrs. Eunice," she said quietly, "would you mind stepping into the hallway with me for a moment?" Kenneth's chair scraped the floor. "We're in the middle of something." She looked at him once. "I wasn't speaking to you. Before I tell you how I ended up in that chair, let me ask you something. If you believe that growing older should never mean becoming invisible in your own life, please stay with me and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from today? And what time is it where you are? Because knowing you're out there makes this easier to say out loud. My name is Eunice, and this is the story of the year I almost lost everything Thomas and I spent a lifetime building. Thomas and I married in the summer of 1981 at a small Baptist church outside Clarksville, Tennessee. The reception was in his mother's backyard. Someone strung white lights between the oak trees. We ate pulled pork and potato salad and danced until the neighbors called twice to complain. I have never in my life felt more certain of anything than I felt standing on that patchy lawn in a second-hand dress, watching my husband laugh at his own jokes. Thomas was a contractor. He built additions, repaired roofs, poured concrete. He came home most evenings smelling like sawdust and sunscreen, his hands always rough, always stained with something. I worked for the United States Postal Service for 31 years, starting as a mail carrier and retiring as a distribution supervisor. We were not wealthy people. We knew exactly what we were, and we were proud of it. We bought our house on Birchwood Lane in 1989. 3 bedrooms, a detached garage. Thomas, immediate claim for his workshop, a backyard, big enough for the garden I always intended to plant and never quite got to. Thomas paid off the final mortgage note the same month he retired. He framed the bank statement and hung it in the workshop. I thought it was the silliest thing I'd ever seen. Now I understand exactly why he did it. Thomas had one rule he repeated until I could finish his sentences. If you can't explain where the money went, you shouldn't have spent it. He kept a handwritten ledger every single month, not on a computer, but a green cloth ledger from the office supply store, recording every bill, every deposit, every expense. When he died, I found 22 of those ledgers on the workshop shelf, going all the way back to 1983. We saved carefully, not dramatically, not with some grand strategy, just consistently. By the time Thomas retired, we had a little over $175,000 in savings and a house that appraised just under $240,000. To some people that might not sound like much. To us it was every overtime shift, every vacation we postponed, every year we drove a car until it told us it was finished. Thomas passed away 19 months ago. A heart attack, sudden and thorough, the kind that doesn't negotiate. We were sitting at the kitchen table eating Sunday breakfast when it happened. He made a sound I had never heard from him before, and then he was gone. The paramedics were kind. The hospital staff were kind. None of it helped. Grief is not one single feeling. It's more like weather. Different every morning. Sometimes a drizzle. Sometimes a full storm. Sometimes just a gray sky that sits there and refuses to move. I navigated it mostly alone. I had friends who checked on me, a sister in Memphis who called every few days, and I had my son, Kenneth. Kenneth is 44 years old. He runs a small construction company in Nashville, about an hour north of us. He and his wife, Monique, have been married 12 years. He also has a daughter from his first marriage, Jade, who is 16 and lives with her mother most of the time, but visits on weekends and summers. After Thomas died, Kenneth started coming around more. That felt like an answer to something I had not even prayed for yet. He would stop by on Saturday mornings, fix things that didn't necessarily need fixing, sit at the kitchen table and drink coffee with me. Some Saturdays he brought Jade, and those were the best ones. She would sit beside me on the back porch and tell me about school, about her friends, about whatever book she was reading. She had Thomas's habit of paying attention to small details. She'd notice when I moved a piece of furniture or changed the picture frames. She once asked if I'd always had that particular houseplant in the corner. Yes, Jade. For 11 years. For a while, those visits felt like proof that losing Thomas hadn't taken everything with him. Then the questions started, small ones at first. Kenneth asked one afternoon whether I still felt comfortable managing the bills on my own. I told him yes, I had been managing bills since before he was born. He nodded and said he was just checking. He asked whether I'd updated my will since Thomas died. I said I'd spoken with my attorney. He asked which bank held my savings account. I told him, and thought nothing more of it. Looking back, I notice now that I answered every question without hesitation. I was his mother, and he was asking. That felt like reason enough. Then one Saturday he came without Jade. He sat down and folded his hands the way he always did when he was about to say something difficult. Thomas used to do the exact same thing. He told me his company was in trouble. A general contractor had pulled out of a major project mid-build, leaving Kenneth covering costs he hadn't planned for. He needed money to make payroll, keep the business alive until the job refinanced. He asked to borrow $25,000. I asked if the bank could help. He said the credit line was already exhausted. I asked about Monique's family. He said they didn't have it. Every answer came quickly. Practiced. The way you rehearse something you know someone will push back on. I thought about Thomas's ledger. I thought about his voice. I thought for 3 full days before I called Kenneth and told him I would help. We went to the bank together. I transferred $25,000. He thanked me more times than I could count. 3 months passed. The money did not come back. I didn't bring it up. I convinced myself he needed more time. 6 weeks after that, he asked again. This time it was $18,000. Same story, different contractor. He said it was the last thing, that one more payment would stabilize everything, that he could begin repaying me by spring. Then he said Jade's tuition for a summer enrichment program was already overdue. He knew exactly which name to use to reach me. I said no. Kenneth went quiet in a way that had no gentleness in it. Then he said I would still have plenty of money left even after helping him, as though he already knew the exact balance in my account. That sentence sat with me for days. After that, he started mentioning my memory. Not cruelly, not dramatically, just casually. You already told me that, Mom. You called me by Uncle Jerome's name. You forgot the oven was on. Some of it may have been true. Some of it I could not verify. But the pattern was unmistakable once I recognized it. Monique started calling more often too. She had never been a regular caller before. Now she phoned every few days, sweet and concerned. She asked whether I was sleeping well, whether I felt dizzy, whether I had considered having someone come by during the week just to help out. She mentioned a neighbor's elderly mother, who had fallen and lain on the floor for 2 hours before anyone found her. We just worry about you being alone in that big house, Monique said. I thanked her and got off the phone. Then, one Thursday morning, I noticed my mail had been tampered with. Not obviously, just the kind of tamper that leaves an envelope slightly off at the corner. The kind I learned to recognize from 31 years of handling other people's correspondence. My monthly bank statement had been opened and resealed. I called the bank the next morning. A representative told me someone had recently requested an additional copy of my statement, citing a change of address and that a copy had been mailed to a second location. The name given was mine. I asked for the address. I did not recognize it. I asked the bank to block any further changes to my account without direct confirmation from me. The representative made a note. I thanked her and sat in my kitchen for a long time without moving. Thomas had written something in the back of his last ledger. I had found it 2 weeks after he passed, while going through his workshop. It seemed like a note he had written for himself. Maybe late at night when he was working something out. It said, "The easiest way to make someone powerless is to convince them first that they're fragile." I had read it once and closed the book. That morning, I read it again. I called Stuart Ames, the attorney who had handled Thomas's estate, a man we had worked with for nearly 15 years. I told him everything I had noticed over the past several weeks. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Eunice, I want you to come in." The following Monday, I sat in his office on Oak Street and walked him through the timeline, the loans, the account questions, the comments about my memory, the tampered statement. Stuart took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back. "Has anyone asked you to sign anything you haven't fully read?" I said, "Not yet." "Then we're going to make sure not yet becomes never." He filed a protective instruction with my bank that same afternoon. No transfers, no structural changes, no power of attorney activations without my direct in-person confirmation. He drafted a letter to be added to my property file, noting that I had full legal competence, and that any deed transfers required his sign-off. I drove home feeling steadier than I had in months. That weekend, Jade came to visit. She was quieter than usual. She helped me fold laundry without saying much, which was not like her. Finally, sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of sweet tea, she looked up at me. "Grandma," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise you won't say it came from me." I set down my glass. "You have my word." She pulled out her phone. She had photographs, 41 of them, taken over 2 visits to her father's house, when she was certain neither Kenneth nor Monique was watching. She had moved through his office the way only a teenager can, barely breathing, phone held low. The first photograph showed a document with my name at the top. Durable power of attorney. Eunice May Hargrove. My signature appeared at the bottom. I had never signed that document. The second showed a deed transfer. My property on Birchwood Lane. The receiving party. A company called Copperfield Asset Holdings. I had never heard of Copperfield Asset Holdings. The remaining photographs showed spreadsheets, loan applications, correspondence with a real estate investment firm, and in the very last image, a handwritten note in Monique's handwriting that read, "Once the POA clears, list the house first, then move the savings." Jade watched me scroll through every image without speaking. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "Don't apologize," I said. "You did a brave thing." She started to cry, quietly. I moved my chair beside hers and held her the same way. I held her when she was 4 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. "I love my dad," she said. "I know you do. I just didn't know how to watch this and stay quiet. You were never supposed to carry this alone. You did the right thing." I called Stuart from the back porch as soon as Jade left. He told me to bring the phone to his office first thing Monday. He would have every image reviewed by a document examiner. Then he told me one more thing. "Eunice, before you go to bed tonight, look up Copperfield Asset Holdings." I found 2 references. One was a complaint filed with the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance the previous year. The other was a civil case involving an elderly woman in Murfreesboro who had signed over her home to the same company, believing she was signing a routine maintenance agreement. She was 71 years old. She never recovered her property. 2 days later, Kenneth called to tell me he had scheduled an appointment on my behalf at a title company on Commerce Street. "Some routine estate planning updates," he said. A friend of his had recommended the notary there. He made it sound administrative, almost boring. I said I would go. I didn't tell him I had already spoken with Stuart. I didn't tell him about the photographs. I went because I needed to see exactly what he was willing to do when given the opportunity. We arrived on a Tuesday morning. The lobby was quiet, carpeted, the kind of office that smells like printer toner and old coffee. The notary met us in a small conference room. Her name badge read Anita Gorman. She arranged the documents in a neat row and began explaining each one in a practiced, even voice. Then she stopped. She picked up the durable power of attorney form. She looked at the signature block, which already bore what appeared to be my name. She looked at me. She checked my Tennessee ID against the signature. She looked back at the form. "Mrs. Eunice," she said, "would you mind stepping into the hallway with me for a moment?" In the hallway, she sat across from me, near the window, and placed the document on her knee. "I need to ask you something plainly, and I need an honest answer." "All right. Did you sign this?" I looked at my name on the page. The handwriting was close, but it was not mine. Whoever had copied it had pressed too evenly, traced too carefully. A forgery made by someone who had practiced, but not long enough. "No," I said, "I did not." She nodded slowly. "I have been notarizing documents for 22 years. I can tell when someone signs their own name." She paused. "I also need to tell you that the company listed on your deed transfer, Copperfield Asset Holdings, came across our desk 14 months ago. We refused to process a transaction involving them. Our compliance officer flagged the entity, and we reported it to the state. I believe there may already be an open inquiry." She reached into her jacket pocket and handed me a business card. On the back, she had already written a name and a direct number. "This is a contact at the Tennessee Attorney General's office, Elder Justice Division. I want you to call today, not tomorrow. Today." She stood and smoothed her blazer. "I'm going to walk back in there and tell your son there's a procedural hold requiring review. That's all I'll say. But please make that call." When Kenneth found me in the hallway, I was calm. I told him I was tired and would like to go home. He agreed too quickly, the way people do when they are regrouping. That afternoon, I made the call. Within 72 hours, 2 investigators from the Attorney General's office sat at my kitchen table and reviewed every photograph Jade had taken. They took statements from me, from Stuart Ames, and from Anita Gorman. They subpoenaed Kenneth's business records. What they found went beyond my house and my savings. Copperfield Asset Holdings had been connected to at least 4 similar cases in Middle Tennessee. In 2 of those cases, elderly homeowners had already completed the transfer before anyone intervened. Kenneth cooperated eventually. He said Monique had introduced him to the company, that she had framed it as an investment strategy, that he hadn't fully understood what it would cost me. I don't know how much of that was true, and how much was a man trying to soften his own sentence. What I know is that he put his name on documents he knew I hadn't signed. That part was not someone else's idea. Monique retained private counsel and did not cooperate. Jade was never required to testify. I made sure of that. The photographs she had taken were sufficient on their own. The investigation ran 8 months. At the end of it, Kenneth accepted a plea agreement that included restitution, community service, and 3 years of supervised probation. Monique faced separate civil charges. Copperfield Asset Holdings was dissolved by court order. One of the 2 homeowners who had lost property entered a state recovery program and got her house back. The other did not. I think about that other woman often. I hope someone like Anita Gorman had been in the office with her too. Jade called me the evening her father's sentence was finalized. She didn't say much, just, "Are you okay, Grandma?" I told her the truth. "I'm getting there. I love you. I love you more than anything in this world, Jade. What you did took more courage than most grown adults ever find in themselves." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Grandpa would have been proud of you." I held the phone and didn't answer right away, because she was right, and because saying so out loud would have made me cry. Thomas would have said I should have seen it sooner. But he also would have poured us both a cup of coffee and told me I handled it fine in the end. That was marriage. 38 years of someone who knew exactly what to say. Several months after the case closed, I received a short letter from Anita Gorman. She had been invited to speak at a statewide training for notaries and title agents on elder financial abuse. She said my case, without my name attached, had become part of the curriculum. She thanked me for making the call that same afternoon. I framed the letter. It is hanging in Thomas's workshop now, right beside the final mortgage statement. Kenneth and I speak occasionally. There is nothing easy in those conversations yet. Maybe there will be someday. Forgiveness is not a destination. It is a direction. and right now I am still finding my footing. But Jade comes every other weekend. She sits on the back porch with me and tells me about her plans, her classes, the college applications she has started drafting. Last month, she helped me plant the garden I had been putting off since 1989. We put in tomatoes, 2 kinds of basil, and a row of rose bushes along the back fence. Thomas would have had something to say about the placement of those rose bushes. He always did. If you have stayed with me through this story, I want to leave you with 3 things. First, trust is not the same as love. You can love your children and still require that they earn your trust. Those are not contradictions. Second, if someone begins telling you that you are no longer capable of managing your own life, ask yourself who benefits from you believing that. And third, there are still people in this world, notaries, clerks, attorneys, grandchildren, who believe that an older woman's name on a piece of paper should mean exactly what she intended it to mean. Find those people. Hold on to them. My name is Eunice. I am 67 years old. I own my home on Birchwood Lane free and clear. I balance my own accounts. I make my own decisions. And no forged signature, no shell company, and no one who once called me mom will ever take that from me again.